This doesn't work.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Executive Director Roger Durling.
Good evening, Santa Barbara! Are you guys having a good time? Excellent. And how do you guys feel about Brendan Gleeson and Colin Farrell? Well, you're in for quite a treat. How many of you have seen In Bruges? What an incredible cinematic pair the two of them make. I have to thank, it's an honor for us to thank our sponsors, especially the Manitou Fund, our presenting sponsor, Nora Hurley, and then a special shout out to the board of directors of the film festival. Thank you to them. How many of you were here last night for the Virtuosos Award? Well, you know our moderator, who is one of the greatest class acts I know. Please give a warm welcome to Dave Karger. He is the Turner Classic Movies host and Entertainment Weekly Awards correspondent. Please welcome Dave Karger!
Thank you so much. Of course. Thank you, Roger. Thank you to Nora Hurley. Thank you to Linda Weinman. Thank you to everybody involved with the Santa Barbara International Film Festival for having me back for my 13th year at this festival. I love being here. And I always love doing the Virtuosos event, but I'm also super excited to be talking to the stars of one of my favorite films of the year. And I was thinking about it, and I feel like our two special guests tonight are kind of like the chocolate and the peanut butter of the acting world. They're really great and delicious on their own, but when you combine them, it's like next level amazing. One of our special guests tonight is an Emmy winner. The other one of our special guests tonight is a two-time Golden Globe winner, but they are both now first-time Oscar nominees for their incredible performances in the Banshees of Inisherin. But before I bring out Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson, let's take a look at a phenomenal montage of some of their acting work.
This festival always does such a wonderful job putting those montages together, so congratulations to Mike McGee and everybody involved with editing that. It was just terrific and a great way to set the stage. And I'll tell you what, while I was watching that just now for my second time, I really studied these two gentlemen's hair color, so now I know which one's the chocolate and which one's the peanut butter. Please help me welcome two brand spanking new Academy Award nominees, Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson. Welcome to Santa Barbara, gents.
Thanks, man.
It's great to see you both.
Great to see you, Dave.
Okay, so by my math, you two first met not because of In Bruges, but a couple of years before In Bruges. I think around 2006, you were going to maybe work on another film together that I think, Brendan, you were going to direct. Ended up not happening, but that was the first meeting, 2006. I mean, would you guys have thought 17 years later, here you'd be at a show like this with your first Oscar nomination for a movie you've done together?
Actually, I have the piece of paper here I wrote. No, not at all. I mean, I have a fairly fecund imagination, but not feckin' imagination. Fecund imagination. But I would never have thought that we'd end up here on this couch together, you know, for this film, having a chat and being here in front of you all. No.
You know, we had Carrie Condon here last night, and I learned all about feckin'.
Oh, you would,
so
yeah.
I'm a little bit of an
She
expert.
took care of that master class for us.
She did,
Right, that's
right.
that done.
What are your recollections of that first meeting in the Chelsea Hotel?
It's in the Chelsea Hotel, yeah. And my son Donald was in over on Broadway, I think, at the time.
And so he put us up in the Chelsea Hotel, or pointed us in that direction. So we were kind of in the centre of it all. That was a year later, wasn't it?
He put you up? I didn't know.
I think, no, I'm getting mixed
So
up.
that's when you started
I met you.
testing him for drugs.
Yeah, I know.
When he started.
Anyway, I met Colin in the Chelsea Hotel, and there was something that just from the very beginning, there was a kind of an innate courtesy. There was a kind of a generosity of spirit, great crack, good fun, and there was a kind of an element of integrity and decency about him that kind of shone through. That was kind of pretty. It just felt a very true instinct. And I had come trying to get this film sort of off the ground that I'd been attempting to adapt from the book, At Swim Two Birds, that unfortunately still hasn't grown wings. But
Are you going to go back and have a look?
Pardon?
Are you going to go back and have a look?
I have to balance it with that of a divorce if I do.
How much are you willing to pay for your art in real life?
This is the big question, yeah. Do I cut my fingers off to spite my hand? Yeah, so it's like, I didn't imagine that we'd be here, but it's funny, that montage there gave me a kind of joy about all the journeys we've had separately and together over the years. And this really is very special, I have to tell you. Thank you very much. Thank you for this.
So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to take a look at some clips of both of your work throughout the years in films that you've done together and separately. But I want to just take a couple minutes before we break into the first clip, because you guys both come at acting from very different ways. I mean, you were making your first films as someone in his low 20s, and you didn't make your first film until a decade later in age. I think you were 34 because you were a school teacher, Brendan, for 10 years, along with acting. What kind of a teacher were you? I know you taught literature in a Catholic school, but when you think back to that man, were you tough? Were you?
Oh yeah.
I was taught a lesson in my first year of teaching practice, where, due to extraordinary laziness and lack of foresight, I left it too late to get to school apart from my old alma mater where I'd gone to Christian Brothers School. And I went back in thinking I knew how this thing worked. And I was absolutely eaten alive by the pupils. I said the first day, lads, don't try it on. I went to the school, I know all the tricks, forget about it. They didn't. And they destroyed me. So I learned after that you have to have a bit of a bark just at the beginning. And I loved my teaching, I have to say. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the lads. And it was a great time. But once I was able to write actor on my passport, I found I'd come home in a very particular way.
It would be amazing to have him as a teacher, though, because he's somebody who connects so deeply to what he does and cares so deeply about anywhere that his energy is directed towards, whether it's his kids, Mary, the missus, and I know him, of course, mostly having worked with him very closely, and the amount of care and the amount of attention and consideration, which is sometimes best delivered, with a bit of an iron fist. At times it has to be in that kind of environment, but it would have been amazing. What I'm saying is I might have finished school if I had you as a teacher. I might have stayed around. You might have thrown me. You might have thrown me out earlier.
No, you wouldn't. You would have been through. You wouldn't. No, I'd be on.
No, you would have saw through me.
I'd be on to you like a.
Yeah, you would have saw through me is the thing.
Yeah.
It would have been interesting.
But I did have to say the Madame Moody experience on the Harry Potter 4 was my first one, but it was. I was able to challenge, because I was a teacher in that, so being able to channel my own school years, but hopefully less those than the way I had been taught. I remember pegging a piece of chalk at a child, all of whom had very different kind of educational sort of experiences than what I had had. And the kids were absolutely boggle-eyed that anybody would do that except one Irish kid who was on the cast. And he just dodged very quickly as if...
That's brilliant.
If you were to be a teacher, Colin, what subject would you teach?
Truancy.
Nice.
So, I mean, if Brendan came at it from a kind of more literature background, what was your way into performing? What was the early inspiration for
I think it was the impetus to try and figure out, to be honest with you, just to try and figure out, without being as cognizant of it at the time, I had a lot of stuff inside me, a lot of curiosity, a lot of questions, a lot of fear. And I think that I know that the first acting class I did was with a teacher called Conal Carney, who's an extraordinary actor in his own right and an amazing, amazing teacher. And it was just, I was given a platform and I was offered a space to articulate the uncertainty of some of the thoughts I had about myself and about the world, and also the curiosity of the same. So it was that. I never grew up in a house like, you know, our world where emotions were kind of seen as weakness and you didn't talk about your feelings and all that kind of stuff you can imagine. And so to finally be in a space where those things weren't only welcome but they were invited was an extraordinary thing for me. And that's still what it is to me today. There's a fundamental experience that has never changed from the first acting class I went into to today. I think I lost sight of it for a couple of years for various other reasons, but it's certainly present today.
I love that. So what I want to do, the first kind of montage of clips that I want to show, I put them together because for both of you, I feel like they were the breakout moment, the first breakout moment. So the first clips that we're going to watch for you, Colin, is a clip from Tigerland. And I remember seeing Tigerland when it came out in 2000. And a bunch of us from Entertainment Weekly, where I was working at the time, went to see this because Joel Schumacher, the director, set up a screening for us. And I remember walking out thinking, who is this guy? I had never seen you before. And what state in the American South is he from?
Yeah. Because that accent was kind of all over the place, is what you're saying.
No, it was pretty great.
He's from Georgia. No, he's from North Carolina. He's Texan.
No, that's really not what I meant. I meant it was so good that he's
Thank you.
like...
I know I'm being silly.
Right. And then,
Thank you.
And then the other clip that we're going to see right now is from The General, which is a terrific film that you did, Brendan, in 1998. And you had already done roles in Far and Away and Michael Collins at that point and Braveheart, but I feel like this was a big breakout. So let's watch these two, and then we'll talk a little bit more about it afterwards. So for people who are not familiar with the story of The General, Martin Cahill, your character, was a gangster who had died about 4 years before the movie came out. So it was recent Irish history. And I remember that gave you a little bit of trepidation or hesitancy of doing it, right?
Yeah, kind of, in a number of different ways. I remember going for a meal with John Boorman, who is a legend, obviously, and just asking him what were we trying to do with this? Because he was a controversial figure, and he was a very dangerous man. Like, we ended up doing it under armed guard for a while, and there was all that because it was all still alive, but it was all still kind of current. But it was more about, I remember trying to figure out what we were trying to do with it. And it was just John's expression of exploring the humanity of somebody who is on the other side. And I remember at the end of the film, there's a great friend of mine, great actor, Sean McGinley. He's in the movie as well. He's brilliant in it. But he said, "That's amazing. We're seeing the world through their prism now." And so the idea that you would put yourself in the other shoe, we got a lot of flack from it because people said we were making a hero of somebody who inflicted great pain on people, and which he did. But there was also another side to the story that needed to be told. So I learned more of, like, the experience with John Boorman was the thing more than anything. He brought me behind the camera and taught me pretty much everything I know or knew up to then or about film acting and the nature of it, and the role of the camera in the narrative, and how much can be told through the camera without an actor doing very much, and then how to dance with the camera, basically. Even that pool hall, the way he would construct, he always used a single camera. There was one day he used two because I had to shoot McGinley in the knee, and he wanted to get a close-up, and he threw it away in frustration because his narrative voice within the camera was so strong. And I could keep going for a long time about him. He was just unbelievable. He showed me, he had me in a car, and this is a guy who went around covering his face all the time, and in real life that's what he did. He didn't want ever to be photographed. He went around like that with his hand in front of his face. John Voight was in the movie as well. He was
He was
magnificent.
incredibly present in the Irish press. I was very young when all this was going on, but he was incredibly. Martin Cahill was a very, very big figure in the Irish press, in the criminal underworld, which was becoming less and less underworld.
Yeah, and he'd been buttonholed by a reporter, and going in. He used to collect the dole, the welfare every week, and yet he was rolling all this money. But like he would just blag it out, and he would do the entire thing with a hood over his face and his hand in front of his face. But I just felt we were supposed to be casing a joint of a jeweller's we were going to rob, and I said to John, I feel very exposed here. I was just sitting in the car with nothing covering my face, and he took me out and said, come over here. And he brought me around to the monitor, and he showed me that Seamus Deasy had the camera positioned in such a way that there was a shadow on the window that cut across in a jagged kind of frame right across, and it looked as if I was peering out from behind cover. And just the cinematic truth of that as against what I was feeling within the car was that everybody can see me here in a way that never happens. It was just so beautiful, and I think that's when I really fell in love with film as just what it is.
Well, John Borman did Deliverance and Hope and Glory. I mean, he's like legendary. And you guys are still friends?
Oh, absolutely.
All these years later?
Yeah, he's 90. Yeah, and he's moved back. He came over to London or to Ireland in 1969. He basically reinvented the Irish cinema industry over there, and taught so many people, and brought Gabriel Byrne and Liam Neeson, all of these people, kind of sent them through and on their way. And he's finally moved back over to England to be with Charlie, his son, and their family, and give up his beloved Animo, where he has oak trees and stuff like that, hundreds of them planted. He's just a magnificent man. I love him to death, yeah.
That's great. Colin, I had forgotten that, I had forgotten that not soon after people saw The General, you were in Ordinary Decent Criminal, which was kind of loosely based on the Martin Cahill story. So you obviously must have been paying attention to The General when it came out.
Yeah, and you worked with Theresa Sullivan. I think it was the same time. It was kind of, I feel, it was an ill-advised venture, really. Be diplomatic and respectful of people's efforts, but it was just that John Borman had made such an extraordinary film, and yours was definitely made before ours. If ours was 6 months later or a year, I'm not sure. But yeah, I've been saying to Brendan recently, I really want to see The General again. And if any of us hadn't seen it, it's an extraordinary piece of filmmaking, and it's so dangerous and it's so immediate. And listening to you talking about the people giving out about the glorification of such a character, I get that. And I get that there's a problem with glorifying people, or Escobar, whoever it is, that have caused incredible damage and wreaked havoc on other people's lives. But the better question for people to be asking is, why are those people already glorified within their communities?
That's right.
And what do the communities lack that allows characters like those to come in and do a little bit for the community and help, so that's the question to be asked.
Exactly.
Instead of just pointing a finger at an hour-and-a-half long film and saying, you're glorifying. Right. Why was he glorified in life? The man was glorified in life in many ways. And again, I'm not justifying what he did, how he lived his life, anything at all. But ours was, it was a great look. It was an incredible experience for me. Working with Theresa Sullivan was a great experience, and it was the first time I was on a film set of a certain scale, doing Ordinary Decent Criminal, so I learned loads. I got to work with Peter Mullen.
Oh, yeah.
And I had just seen, do you remember the Stella Cinema? I don't know if it's still there.
It is.
Is it still there?
Yeah.
That's lovely. I had just seen My Name is Joe.
Oh, he's the best.
Ken Loach's My Name is Joe, and I had to go in and see Peter the next day, and I couldn't look at him because it was just such an extraordinary and brutal and raw and painful and honest, I think is the biggest word, honest experience for me to watch Peter Mullen in that film. So
he's incredible.
It was amazing, that film, yeah.
When you think back to Tigerland, it's like instant star-making performance. I just vividly remember seeing it. Did you feel confident making that?
No, not at all. I was just a good spoofer. It was just, I did have a certain cockiness, like genuinely, there was a certain cockiness. Because we all exist within and beneath and above and to the side of certain levels of whether it's character or persona or ego or all the above and the rest. So I did have a cockiness that was quite sincere and that I had unconsciously worked on and galvanized, and I brought it into the world and I said, there you go, this is me, what do you think? And it worked out all right for a while. But beneath all that, and if I'm any use in Tigerland, it was as much, if not more, to do with probably how afraid I was at the time. Yeah, probably, and I wouldn't have even been aware or had a communion with how afraid I was at the time. But I was 23 or 24. I remember having a meeting with Arlen Milchan, who produced the film that Joel directed, and Joel Schumacher, Lord rest him, passed on a couple of years ago, one of the great loves of my life, really. Joel took a punt on me. I mean, I'd done a couple of bits and pieces. I'd done a television show, one play in the Donmar Warehouse, Ordinary Decent Criminal. And I read for Joel a few times, and he wanted me in the part, but I had to go and meet Arlen Milchan, who owned New Regency.
Big deal.
Big deal. I didn't know what a big deal it was, but a big deal. I found out what a big deal it was when I walked into the room, and I just felt his presence. Okay. And it wasn't foreboding, and it wasn't hostile. It was the exact opposite. It was the ownership of a warmth and an intellect and a sense of his own power. And he sat down beside me on the couch, and I remember he literally said, so do you think you can do this? And I thought, oh, fuck. No one had asked me that. I had just kind of put out the pretense that I believed I could. Right. And he said, it was quite brilliant. He said, because if you don't do this film, he said, you get one chance to do your first lead in your first American film.
Yeah.
And he said, this is a complex character. You're playing a guy from Texas. He said, if you mess this up, you may not work in American films again. He said, but we will cast you again. He said, I'll work with you. Joel loves you. I saw the tape. The tape's great. It's fantastic. It's great. We'll work with you. But do you think you can really do this? And I bullshitted again. I said, absolutely, yeah. And yeah, no, absolutely. And that was it. And then I got the call, and it was like Joel Schumacher changed not only my life, but as happens in films and in life, when you work with people and you meet people and you cross paths, sliding doors. My mother's remarried to an American man who lives in Los Angeles. My two sisters are married. I have a niece, and I have two children. Joel Schumacher taking a punt on me, and he was great at that, Joel. Joel said, I don't direct films, I just cast,
St. Elmo's Fire. I mean, come on.
St. Elmo's Fire, The Lost Boys, putting Matthew in. I know Matthew had done stuff, but putting Matthew in A Time to Kill, Flatliners. I mean, he had an eye for young energy that was probably more confused than it was presenting itself to be, and he found that really interesting, because it is part of all of our journeys as human beings to be more confused than we pretend to be in the world. And then, I don't know, maybe the journey is giving yourself permission to go, actually, I'm really confused, and then see what happens.
Not when you're 23, you just got to say yes.
Totally, yeah, you say yes.
I love it. Okay, so the next clip that we want to show is when you guys finally got together for real in Bruges. Written and directed by the fabulous Martin McDonagh, who also did the Banshees of Inisherin. He'll come up again later tonight, but let's watch a little bit of In Bruges.
You need exams.
I know that line, McDonagh.
What's that?
You need exams.
Not you need to pass them or nothing, no, you need exams.
So what's interesting for people who might not be aware, Martin McDonagh is, at this point in his career, already an Academy Award winner, because he did a short film called Six Shooter starring Brendan Gleeson. So you guys had the history already.
Yeah.
What did he say to you? Did he just say, read this, and it was In Bruges, or did he kind of pitch it to you?
Do you know what? Oddly enough, I don't remember. I can just remember reading the script and being through the roof about it. I don't actually remember the process of that particular one. Just hugely excited. I mean, I remember the thing was they were initially Cockneys.
Oh.
Which is fascinating, because then he decided, when he wanted to cast me, that one of them would be Irish. And then he decided that they should both be Cockneys. Irish. But what was interesting to me was that the language hardly changed at all. And, we're both Dublin, and Dublin is was, you know, a semi-British city for a long, long time. It's 100 years out of that particular scenario. But the actual language that was formed in Dublinese, oddly enough, there were very few words, even single words maybe, that might have had to be changed. But the whole structure, and people kind of think it was quintessentially kind of Irish dialogue, but it was written for Cockneys in Cockney. So that part was, I remember all that part of the process, but I don't, and then being thrilled that actually it was really nice, I thought it was really nice that the two of us settled in, and we didn't have to go through any particular, you know, it was another veil that didn't need to be there because these characters are so unlikely. They're unlikely hitmen, let's be honest about it. And at the same time, you have to make sure they appear credible as hitmen, which I think happened, but it was nice not to have another veil, wasn't it?
Yeah.
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 Did either of you know where Bruges was?
I imagine the school teacher here, am I right, had an idea.
I
did.
You did?
I did.
I didn't know.
I'm still confused by the fact that even though it's a Flemish town and that Belgium is divided into the Flemish and the French, that the French version is what travelled, right? So that it's Bruges, whereas in Flemish it's Brugge.
Right. Yeah.
But who wants to say Brugge?
I kind of do.
Yeah, me too.
What's up, brother?
What's up, Brugge? Yeah. Yeah, but it was, it's a town in Belgium, I think.
Plus, in answer to your question where you didn't know, it's only 700 miles from me.
Right.
Where I was living.
Right. That makes sense. So you're giving me an out.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. But Colin, I've heard you say, and we've even talked about this before, where you apparently said to Martin, you had a meeting with him and you said, like, this is a great role, don't cast me, I'm not right for this. Why didn't you think that you were right? Because you watched the movie and it like fits you like a glove.
Chelsea Hotel, Hudson Hotel, I met Martin. I'd known Martin a little bit socially at that point, and my life had changed very dramatically in the year and a half previous to meeting him. I read the script. I thought the script was just extraordinary. I'd never read anything like it, and I've still never read anything like it, and I've read 7 Psychopaths and 3 Billboards, and obviously I read the Banshees once. Can't wait to find out how it ends. I left a few last things out. But I was in a place, Dave, where I just thought, I think I was feeling a bit beat up by, certainly not by the world, but because the world's been very good to me, but my own experience. And I was aware that there was a perception of me, perhaps, which was hard-earned, I might add. And I didn't want anyone, I wanted as few people, I loved the script so much, I wanted as few people to enter the cinema with a preconceived idea of what to expect, or even worse, stay away from the film because I might have burnt a few theatrical bridges over the previous few years. I really did, and that's why I sat with Martin. I said, look, you should really cast. You could do a better job of casting. I mean, Brendan's great. I could see him in the part, but you could do much better than casting. And he said, yeah, great, but I don't care. And I want you in it, and that was it. And I was so glad, because it was really a game changer for me, just creatively and personally.
Well, I went back and watched it again for the first time in 15 years the other day, and of course, Brendan, I definitely took notice, having seen Banshees a bunch of times, that at the end of In Bruges, your hands are like very bloody. I felt like it was a little bit of a foreshadowing for what Martin was going to have you do. Like, is it fun for you to see these through lines in his work, though, because they are there?
They are there if you look at the dogs. I'm not sure about the hand per se. I mean,
Exactly.
yeah, no, I'm not sure if there's anything to do really with the hand that continues to. It's always interesting about Martin, sort of thematically, to try and figure out, the ties and all that. But I would see them as, they're very different characters. And I think Martin, particularly in Banshees, was trying to bring us away as far as he could from the people we had been in Bruges. So that it wasn't in any way a sequel, or it wasn't in any way a continuum. So I think that, in fact, I don't think there was any prescience in the bloody hand. The rest of me was kind of a mess too. Yeah.
It's kind of like bringing the band back together, but they're going acoustic now.
Yeah. I fell 150 feet or something from a tower, so I wasn't really presentable in any part of my corpus. Never mind the hands.
You weren't findable. There was 1 foot on the other side of the town square and a couple of hands over there.
Yeah, I was mixed up, all right. So I do think there was that Martin didn't want to a repeat performance in the writing of it, or so interesting enough. Yeah,
Absolutely. Colin, the great thing about In Bruges, it raised the profile of everybody involved because it got these 3 big Golden Globe nominations. It was nominated for Best Picture and then 2 Best Actor nominations. So you guys were nominated in the same category.
Yeah.
I could only imagine, knowing you guys, you probably each wanted the other one to win.
Totally. Without a shadow of a doubt.
So what's your
No reservations
What's
there,
your
Rob.
recollection of that moment?
I can't recall how much.
He won, by the way. He won. Colin
Yeah,
won.
no, but it was for my first sober blackout. I swear to God, I can't even really remember it. Because it still, it just didn't seem... Anyway, it was a very strange moment. And the thing is with him, it's so obvious. I mean, of course, you're kind of somewhere inside you want to hear and you question the party that wants to hear your name and all that shite. But I know he wishes the best for me and wants only good things to happen for me. And I know that he knows that I only wish the best things for him and want good things to happen for him. So there's a kind of a harmony there that is 100% real.
Love it.
And so, after 2 months, he started returning me calls. As opposed to what it would have been an understandable year. No, it was. I mean, I was.
The reason we actually fell out over Banshees.
14 years.
Yeah.
That's why it took 14 years. It was just, he wants
He
the work
offered
to
me
be
a
celebrated.
hemisphere anyway from the stage, that's what I remember about that. I was kind of really overjoyed, and it was the phrasing of the word hemisphere from the Golden Globe was kind of pretty remarkable and very generous as always.
Well done. All right, let's watch a couple other clips. So what we're going to watch now is a scene of you, Colin, in The Lobster, which is a favorite of mine, directed and written by Yorgos Lanthimos, who's like a freaking genius. And then also a bit from Cold Mountain, featuring Brendan Gleeson. So let's check it out. Brendan, I watched that and I think it was someone's job to make your hair look like that. Like someone probably took a long time just like making sure it was perfectly like
I think I arrived late
dirty.
to set. That was my bedhead.
I went back and I read an interview that I did with you when The General was coming out, and then you had another movie coming out, which was Lake Placid, where you played like this guy from New England, and you said, and you said that you were uncomfortable with Maine, New England.
Yeah,
you were uncomfortable with like with a basic American accent. You said like the general American accent is really hard to do, but you do a Southern accent, I think, quite well. Are those easier to do?
I think they're more easily brought under control by the Irish palate, shall we say. I worked with Tim Monick on that, and
he's great.
he was very specific. I wanted to be specific in as much as I can. It was kind of North Carolina. And, you can never know. Like John Hurt said that an accent should be part of your DNA. And it's a challenge to have it get in that deep. And I love accents. I've always loved accents, even at home, where every townland has a different kind of a cadence. And I've always been interested in it. So I do think it's really interesting how people express themselves. You can learn loads from actually understanding what makes people laugh within the language, what specific words will trigger something, and how it's emphasized. So I do love accents, but you have to fill in a lot. Whatever way the Southern accent moves, that there's a huge kind of correlation between Irish music and the Appalachians and all down there. And so this guy was a fiddle player, he was a musician too. So I knew that music, and it's kind of music that has come and now has a different accent. And so similarly with the accent, it seemed very easy to transfer. There was a kind of a sensibility in it that spoke to me fairly handily, I think.
What year did that take place, Cold Mountain?
2002, I remember.
Sorry, the story was a set.
It was the Civil War, so 1851, 52, whatever it was.
Because it had echoes of, it felt more, and I don't mean to conflate all rural peoples, but it had echoes of Banshees there.
There was, yeah, no, absolutely.
You talk about the similarities in music and the cultural reference points and
Yeah.
the agitations that happened around the dinner table.
Yeah.
You know, because the world was so empty that you didn't really get to express it necessarily
absolutely.
there, and you brought your argument home almost at times.
Yeah, and you know, it was Anthony Minghella did it, and we promised each other to do Beckett after that movie, and then he died.
Yeah.
And to this day, I'm waiting to do Beckett with Anthony Minghella. He was an extraordinarily sensitive, brilliant director. I mean, he remembered something that had happened months ago when we read in rehearsal. During that scene, I remember, he said, "You did something in rehearsal," and he brought us back to that.
Wow.
Yeah, really beautiful. So yeah, that was a very, very interesting project.
That's great. And as you just mentioned, and as is alluded to in the clip we just showed, the character is a fiddle player, just like in Banshees. That must be so exciting to you when you get to do that because you actually play.
Yeah, but the difference with this was I got to play when he was playing badly in Cold Mountain, when he was scratchy. And we went down to put down a pre-record in Nashville, which was one of the best weeks of my life. But they didn't let me play. They brought in, because Oh Brother, Where Art Thou had come out the year before, and it was a massive hit with all that, you know, brilliant music. And so they brought in just the best people that they could, from all the guys, all the old-timey musicians they brought in.
So you were too shite for the shite they were looking for.
Too shite. No, they could play when you're, before he got properly into music, he was rubbish. So they let me play that bit. But for the stuff that was sweet and nice, they had a guy called Stuart Duncan, who was one of the sweetest, most beautiful fiddle players you'll ever hear in American music, sort of bluegrass and old time, and he had great respect for the old time tunes. And I met a man called Dirk Powell there on that film, and that film was mostly filmed in Romania. And myself and Dirk played a lot of music over in Romania. And yeah, it was crazy.
Are you like a Romanian rock star and we're just learning this right now?
He's like David Hasselhoff in Germany.
Exactly.
He can't go anywhere in Romania with this fella, man. It gets messy.
No, I'll just tell you one last thing. There was a night when, like, we were almost finished, and Jack White from the White Stripes was there. I know, amazing. And he put on, at one stage, like, when he arrived, we weren't quite sure. I didn't know, I was terribly, I had no clue who he was. And it was great. We were acting away for ourselves. And we were having a few tunes and stuff at night time. But Dirk Powell, the banjo player, and myself were finished shooting. And we were having a great night, one night, till about 2 or 3 in the morning, playing away. And we got a little message down, could we ever keep it down, from Jack White, who was working in the morning. And Dirk Powell was so proud that we'd sort of been told to shut up by a rock star, that we were it was like his little badge of honor. He said, we'd like this. But imagine being told to shush by rock star. If I rise and rock me. I know, but we had a fantastic time over there. It was really interesting. Yeah.
And Colin, I love both of the films that you made with Yorgos Lanthimos, not only The Lobster, but also The Killing of a Sacred Deer, also starring Barry Keoghan, your co-star from The Banshees of Inisherin. It must be such a unique experience to work on a Yorgos Lanthimos movie. He also did The Favorite with Olivia Colman and Rachel Weisz. I mean, it's so mannered. What's it like on those sets and just to deliver that stuff?
It's, Yorgos' sets are really quiet. Yeah, really quiet, very simple. One of the biggest aspects and one of the great expressions of his specificity as a director is how he frames, where he puts the camera. It's quite lovely to see. He'll come in with his little digital camera and he'll take a couple of angles of the digital camera and he'll have a look, and then he'll just look at his DP and he'll go, and that'll be it, and that's where the camera goes. And it doesn't have any arrogance or pretense. It's beautiful. He just sees the world and the power of film and the perspective of film in a very particular way. The mannerisms, man, it was weird. It was because I had seen Dogtooth, and it was so extraordinary, and it was so twisted and so other. you know, but the performances were almost muted, which just made clear sense to me. And Yorgos never asked me to deliver the lines like I was looking at that clip going, the worst actor on the planet. I mean, it's just all so, but he never asked for the flat effect or anything like that. But it seemed to me that the script that Eftimas Philippou and him, Yorgos, had written was so extraordinarily different, was so extraordinarily kind of subversive, that the worst thing you could do would be to bring recognizable human emotions to it. And it was kind of an emotional vacuum. The whole world, everyone was kind of living in a state of some kind of apathy. So it was just that, it was just try and stay under it, because the script was so extraordinary. Don't do anything to it, don't bring your own shit to it, just stay under it and just deliver the stuff because it's so extraordinary, you know.
That's great. So The Killing of a Sacred Deer, the other film you made with Yorgos, besides Barry, also Nicole Kidman.
Yeah, Nicole, yeah.
Who we just saw with you, Brendan, who's one of my favorite people that I've ever...
She's brilliant. I loved working with Nicole. I loved working with Rachel Weisz as well, yeah. Spoiled both times.
So if Nicole Kidman were to walk in here right now, which of the two of you would she be more excited to see?
I want to see playback and see whose finger came up first.
Exactly. All right, let's move on to the next duo of clips, and I put these two together because it's both of you guys basically disappearing into your characters. So it's Brendan as Winston Churchill in Into the Storm.
Oh yeah, that was good.
And it's you, Colin, as Oz / the Penguin.
Oh yeah, that was good.
In The Batman. Let's check it out.
Angry Penguin.
I just still can't believe that, like, that's you. It's crazy. Brendan, so Into the Storm, I want to ask you about playing it in a second, but before I do, when the Emmy nominations were announced that year, listen to who the 6 people were who were nominated in the category of Best Actor in a limited series or a television movie. It was Kevin Bacon, Kenneth Branagh, Kevin Kline, Ian McKellen, Kiefer Sutherland, and Brendan Gleeson. And who won?
There's only one way to go, man.
Brendan Gleeson. Emmy winner.
Only one way to go.
What do you remember of that night?
I remember being completely shocked and going up, and I made an enormous error that night because at the top of my list of people to thank was my agent and friend of 30 years, Terry Hayden, at home. And she was the one who convinced me. I had a certain resistance to playing Churchill, given his history with Ireland and the whole imperialism of it. Similarly, the way I had with Martin Cahill and a lot of people, it's like, what are we trying to do here? But it was a strange project because it was the tale of an old marriage, really, with Janet McTeer. And it was really well written of an old marriage. It just was really well written. And I met with Thaddeus and all that, but it was Terry who convinced. She said, what other Irish man is going to get to play Churchill? And there was a certain kind of a crossing the road. And I really did, I thought long and hard about it, but it was, you only learn things, or you learn more things from crossing the road to the opposite viewpoint of what you hold. And amazing going over there and working with these British actors and the kind of support I got over there. Joan Washington was the dialect coach, and we went down to County Clare for 2 weeks and just buried ourselves in it. And it was she's Richard E. Grant's spouse who passed away last year, very tragically. It's just, I really miss her even still. But she was a brilliant, brilliant enabler, not just of vowel sounds, but of the whole acting process, how to express yourself, again, part of the DNA. So I went up, of course, on that night. I really was shocked, but somebody said, by the way, don't forget the producers, and gave me a load of producers.
Oh, no.
And the first thing I did was talk about the producers and left out Terry Hayden, who had been the reason I did the job in the first place, out completely. There's a bigger, longer story where she was at the time, and also left out the BBC, who had put their sort of thing behind me, because I forgot them too. And it was just like...
Oh, no.
No, it was... But at the same time, I remember the following morning with Mary sitting down with the Emmy in between us, and I have to say it was kind of sweet. just kind of lovely, yeah.
It's true, though. Sometimes you can't win for winning, right? You know?
Yeah.
Anytime you're stepping into something that could potentially hold the threat of peril in future, I'm going to say, remember the producers. Don't forget the producers.
Yeah.
Jesus.
But my understanding, Brendan, is that one nice thing about Into the Storm, that your mom was nearing the end of her life, and she was given the chance to see it, even though it wasn't going to be.
Yeah, well, that is one of the reasons to thank the producers. I had to ask Frank, would he please send me. My mom was on, the downward path, and I wanted them to see it. And he gave me an advance copy of an early cut to be able to show my mom before she passed away. And so when I won the Emmy, it was kind of paramount that I was glad I got to thank him for that.
Colin, as I said, it's like shocking to watch the clips from the Batman, because it's really remarkable. And we should say that the makeup artist, Mike
Marino.
Yeah. Is Oscar nominated for his work on the Batman, and with that, clearly because of that.
Yeah.
There's something you can find on YouTube, which is it's like an extra from the Batman Blu-ray DVD, and it's this kind of little short feature of how you transformed into Oz, into the Penguin. And there's footage of you, like basically one of the first times that you see it.
It was the first time I put it on. Yeah, that was a magic day, man. That was such a cool day. I grew up on watching John Landis, The Making of Thriller, and what he did there on Michael Jackson's Visage. And so I felt like it was kind of like my own little version of that. I hope that doesn't sound too arrogant. It was magic. I was with these 8 makeup artists. Mike Marino had designed the Penguin, because they didn't like, some people had said to me, why did they cast you? And then why didn't they just cast someone else? I was...
As it needed a great
nervous line. No. But they didn't, I was going to do, I don't know what I was going to do, because before I even got the chance to try and figure it out and how I could bring the 6 or 7 scenes to life with any interest, I was having a meeting with the director, Matt Reeves, and Matt Reeves, I was in his office in London, and he said, have you been talking to Mike? And I said, yeah, we've been texting a little bit, and he goes, did he send you a picture of what Oz is going to look like? And I said, no. He said, you want to see? I said, yeah. And I stood around his desk, and his laptop was open, and I saw for the first time just that. There's none of me in that, and I saw it for the first time, and I thought, I thought it was being recast. I was like, well, I'm gonna. And he said, yeah. He said he can do that, and that's how you're gonna, and then you're gonna be, and then we'll do the body and the whole thing. So it was the first day that we did it. It took 6 or 7 hours. It was in a studio in Warner Brothers. My kid came out after he got picked up from school, and he was like, Dad, I don't want to shake your hand. No, I showed you that footage, didn't I? It's amazing. It's so much fun. And I'm going, how you doing, kid? You want me to read you a bedtime story like this? He's like, no. Smashing the fourth wall here. It got the better of me. I apologize. But it was so much fun. I got so licensed. I got given so much license to have a certain freedom that I've never really felt as an actor. Never felt it to this degree. It was the danger of mask work. It was like if you put on, and I wouldn't recommend it, of course, but if you put on a balaclava and you walk into a store, just a store, not a jewelry store, but just a store, a Rite Aid, there will be something sinister and powerful about how that would feel. It's just strange because you're hidden, and you're hidden in plain sight.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's something about being hidden in plain sight that just gave me license to, and basically that's a long-winded way of saying it wasn't my face, and I had so much fun with it.
But it's so well inhabited. It's a brilliant character. It's like, I didn't want that to stop. I wanted to see so much, because a lot of the time the makeup can overpower that.
Right.
But the power of what's happening behind, and I remember watching it, and I said to you, it was like every so often I saw Carl's eyes as Carl's eyes, just a flash where they were kind of recognizable. But it was a character who existed. The makeup thing became almost, it was only part of a character.
It was funny because I think exactly that. I think the opposite thing happened on this than happened on The Lobster. What I was saying about The Lobster, trying to get underneath it, because the dialogue was good. Matt Reeves' script was fantastic, and the scenes that he wrote for Oz the Penguin were great. But when I saw that makeup, that's when the potential for the character came alive for me. I wasn't really getting it on the page, as I said. It was early on in the process when I saw Mike's work, and it was all Mike. It was not meant to look like that, as I said. When I saw that face, I thought, the face had a history. It just, honest to God, on a screen in Matt Reeves' office, the face had movement. It had a history, it had a story, it had a vulnerability, it had a ferocity. And so instead of with the Lanthimos stuff, it was kind of like, Jesus, I better meet this makeup. The makeup is so good, I better get myself up to it. You know?
Well, and now it's a television series with you playing the same character.
Yeah.
I don't know at what stage you're in, but like, is it...
Starting 2 weeks.
Because you're going to have to do that process many more times than you had to for the movie.
Yeah, we do 4 days a week for about 5 months. Yeah, about 3 or 4 hours in the chair. Give me a chance to learn my lines.
Wow.
It's worth it though. That's the thing. Honest to God.
Well, for the fun that you're having and for the...
When you see the result, I mean, it's very... I'm utterly humbled by the genius of Mike Marino. I mean, he's a really, really special artist. And the people he works with, Mike Fontaine and the whole crew of them, they're just, I mean, they're canvas. You just go on, then make me into an piece of art. Fantastic.
But it seems to be liberating as well, rather than caging you in.
That's what, it's one or the other, isn't it? It's like the dialect work. Dialect work,
right.
You find it's either a barrier between you and the character, or it's a conduit into, a deeper aspect of what you're trying to present.
I love it. All right, well, now it's time for us to watch a couple scenes from the Banshees of Inisherin. The reunion. The reunion. Let's check it out. There's so much to love and appreciate in what Martin McDonagh has achieved and with the help of the two of you. And as people are, I'm sure, aware, this is a film that is speaking to larger issues in the history of Ireland and what was going on at the time. This movie takes place 100 years ago. But also at its face value, when I saw it, I was so riveted and invested just in the story of these two friends and what was going to happen, whether they were going to work it out. I'd be curious to know, in the playing of it, Brendan, how much do you choose to be aware during each scene of the larger meanings, and how much are you just really concentrating on the relationship on its face value?
Well, it's an interesting question because I think Colm's mindset is addressing all the bigger issues. He's addressing mortality in a very purposeful way. I think he's in deep despair from the very beginning, suicidal to an extent, and is in a certain degree of survival mode. So mortality and the implications of that, and art within the scheme of things, all the profundities of that are impinging on him almost to an a ridiculously unhealthy degree. So the fact that what's going on, I mean, there's a reference, I think, in or around that scene to going over where the policeman's gone over to the island and to oversee an execution, and he can't be bothered even to know which side the execution is on. He's been flippant, of course, because he would be government officer being the thing, but at the same time, I think Colm is shocked by that. So he understands the larger scheme of things more than he's really cognizant of what's happening in actuality. So that the relationship as such is lost in a kind of a sense of looking at the profundities of the world, oddly, whereas Pádraig is completely in tune because the profundities haven't impinged themselves on him yet, which doesn't last either.
And Colin, obviously everybody on screen agrees that the character you play, Pádraig, is dull. I mean, which is very risky to put a character described as dull at the center of your movie. I would argue he's not dull. Where do you fall?
No, I don't. I think he's dull. I was having a chat with Pete Hammond about dullness, I think, and I just don't think there's such thing as a dull human being, you know? I think that, no, but I don't. I think it's impossible. Like, even if you just go from a physiological standpoint, the human being cannot be dull. There are people I have found dull. There are people that have found me dull. There is no such thing as a dull human being. So that's one part of that, so I agree with you. But then Martin, of course, writes someone who is accused by the island, as you said, of being dull, but the thing about him is everywhere has to have an archetype. We all fall into some version of an archetype. We have to be able to label each other. We have to be able to recognize where threat comes, where enjoyment may be had, where support may be had, where hostility is best kept away from. So there's all these different types that we fit into, generally speaking. And on the island, everyone has a type, and I'm that fella. And so, as Brendan has said before, when it begins to be called out, I don't think anyone, I think this guy was Pádraig's protector, not just his friend. You know, I don't think Pádraig could believe that this man gave him as much time as he did. So I think Pádraig saw and probably felt the best of himself, as we often do, through the eyes of his closest friend. And when that friendship is withdrawn, then it's almost open season on the island. The protection isn't there anymore, and he becomes kind of a laughing stock. So I didn't think he was dull. I thought he was very sweet. I mean, he's not much of a conversationalist, but obviously, but he's connected, you know, as Brendan was saying, he's connected to nature, he's connected to the wonder and the simplicity of the world around him. There's a lot to be said for that.
Well, I think he was, like, I have no problem understanding the friendship between somebody whose head is banging away and not really giving himself a whole lot of peace. I don't think that's a new thing with Colm. And then a man who has no filter between him and the joy of life. There's something deeply profound about that of itself. So the immediacy of his connection, the pure, unadulterated joy he takes in the ordinary, is such balm for the soul of somebody like Colm for such a long time.
Until it's an agitation.
Until he decides that he needs to find it through art and that this becomes too much.
It becomes cloying then, I imagine, after a point.
I think he's just looking for peace, but he's not going to get it. He'll get a short respite through music, but he's not going to get peace that way anyway. Yeah, I think we see by the end that it hasn't brought him a whole lot of peace for himself.
And it's kind of, not to quantify, but it's almost to me, just as a reader of the script, not as someone who was in the film, because it belongs to you guys much more than it belongs to me, but it's almost a parable for the impossibility of the personal experience not to go out into the community. You know, that one person makes such a consequential decision and such kind of even though it's only verbally violent initially and then it becomes through self-mutilation, physical violence, it's a violent action. The withdrawal of the friendship so suddenly, without any explanation, is such a violent action, and stuff begins to happen in the community. And by the end of, the only person that gets out, and she doesn't get out free, she pays a price, and that is whatever sadness, it's a question for Kerry, who you saw last night, whatever sadness or whatever guilt she may or not feel for leaving the island, but the only person that gets out and really makes the change that's essential for life to evolve for her, and she's the representation of hope, as far as I'm concerned, is Kerry's character, my sister Siobhan. Yeah. She's extraordinary. The rest of us are left, you know.
And she doesn't do it at the cost of kindness. Colm tries to escape from it, but he doesn't maintain what should be his natural kindness.
Yeah,
and I think that's why Siobhan is allowed to be that beacon of hope, because she doesn't lose herself in the leaving.
Yeah, she tries to bring me with her. She extends that invitation so clearly. Yeah. You know.
How's Jenny the donkey doing?
She's grand. She's living large, as they say. She'll be on MTV Cribs next week. She's put on a few, and she's got her winter coat on. She's rocking and rolling, man. We got a picture of her a couple of weeks ago, and she, honest to God, yeah. Got a picture of her. She's out to pasture. Yeah. She's one and done, as they say, one film, and she was like, fuck this. No way. 6 takes, 4 takes, fucking bell on my neck. Thanks, Martin.
I'm out. Well, speaking of hope, here's my final question. What can we all do to hope that the 3 of you, the 2 of you and Martin, will make another movie sooner than 14 years from now?
It's all on Martin, yeah.
Well, I have a guy that we can talk to about that. To present this year's Virtuoso Awards to Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson, please help me welcome someone who earned 3 Academy Award nominations this year for producing, writing, and directing The Banshees of Inisherin. Please welcome Martin McDonagh.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Hello, boys. Okay, here we go. The first time I met Colin Farrell was in a pub in London in the early 2000s. It's possible that there was booze involved because I can't remember a single thing about it. But I came away with a very vague sense of him being a wonderful, wonderful human being. There was a more risque version of this opening paragraph, but Colin wouldn't let me say it. Moving on. The first time I met Brendan Gleeson was in a theatre in Galway after an all-day showing of 3 of my early Irish plays. 8.5 hours of theatre, and he stayed all the way to the end, and he didn't even seem pissed off about it. And I remember thinking again, what a wonderful, wonderful human being. Oh boy, has a lot happened since those days. Brendan and I did a short film together after that, and he guided me through it with gentleness and intelligence, and he taught me my first lesson in working with producers. You never, ever have to listen to a single thing they say. And there goes our chances at the Producers Guild Awards next week. After that, we all made In Bruges together. I insisted on 3 weeks of rehearsals, mostly because I thought it would make me sound like a film director. And it worked. They were tricked. And during those 3 weeks of chats and debate in that beautiful medieval town, we all fell hopelessly in love with each other. Somehow, that film turned out really well. And somehow, despite the best efforts of the production company, we all got nominated for some awards at the end of the year. Colin won a Golden Globe. Me and Brendan won jack shit. But we didn't mind, because we all love each other. And even if the same thing happens this season, we still won't mind. Although maybe just a little bit more than last time. After In Bruges, me and Colin made a film called 7 Psychopaths, which I can't remember a single thing about. But I guess thank you. Oh, they like it. And after that, and this brings us almost up to date, I wrote a film called The Banshees of Inisherin, and I sent it to Colin and Brendan. Colin loved it. Brendan thought it was one of the worst things he's ever read. And surprisingly, Brendan was right. So I threw that script away and went off to make 3 billboards instead. Thank you. Then 3 years ago, I thought, I'm all out of good scripts. What am I going to do? So I reread that old shit script, and guess what? Yes, it was still shit, but just after that, somebody broke up with me, and I was really sad. And like any good writer, I thought, hang on a second, there could be money in this. So I quickly rewrote it and sent to the boys, and here we are today in Santa Barbara. Colin and Brendan. No other actors in the world could have played the roles of Porrick and Colin, because no one in the world has the integrity, the sensitivity, and the gentleness to show the fragility and the quiet despair of those men, perhaps of men in general, and to do it without judgment, without comment, instead leaving it for an audience to decide who's right or wrong, if either of them are, and to do all of that while still being totally feckin' hilarious. This is the most fun I've ever had on a film, and it was the most fun because you're the most fun, the most kind, the most talented, most supportive, and the wittiest men I've had the good fortune to come across. Aww. It's true. So thanks for the fun, thanks for the love, and thanks for making my time in film impossibly special. We're in this together for good. If only I would get off my arse and write stuff more often. But that just isn't gonna happen. And so, without further ado, it's my total privilege to get you off your asses and over here to present you with the Cinema Vanguard Award. Woo-hoo!
This is kind of beautiful. We'll just like to thank Santa Barbara International Film Festival, obviously for an unforgettable night. It's kind of thrilling. I was going to say it's humbling, and it is kind of, but it's also thrilling. when a creative life just all comes together. And working with Martin has been one of the great gifts and privileges of my life. Being part of this film with Colin, whom we do actually kind of love each other, all three of us, and it makes things so much easier. And just given that this is a kind of a retrospective thing, I'd like to just on a personal level thank somebody else whom I love, who is my wife Mary, who's with me today. And all of this has been facilitated by just the pure integrity and beauty of her personality, and her support for me has been unstinting. So I'd like to thank her and dedicate this to her.
Thank you, Santa Barbara Film Festival, for this, and as Brennan said, for the extraordinary evening. It is humbling and it's also thrilling. Thanks, Martin, for the kind words. And how much I owe you now for those kind words. There's at least 7 nice things you said about me. That's $20 times 7. We do, as Brendan said, I love, but there's a thing that John O'Donoghue, who's no longer with us, the Irish scholar and poet, spoke about, and it's an Anam Cara, and it's heart friend is the literal translation, but it's about the idea of not just one soulmate, but the people that you meet in your life that are your soulmates. And there's a little bit of that here, because it's not, our friendship and our love is not conditional. I couldn't explain what it is that makes Brendan make such sense to me, or Martin makes such sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me. And if I could explain it, I can say what I love about them, but I couldn't explain why they make such sense to me, because if I could, then there'd be conditions on it or something. There'd be a need, or there'd be something being served. And yes, the heart gets served in friendship at all times, but the idea of an Anam Cara is that it defies any quantification. I just love the two of them very much, and I'm so grateful for them being in my life. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank my sister Claudine Farrell, who's here tonight. And Claudine Farrell has worked with me so closely for 25 years, and she has seen me through more ups and downs. She has demonstrated such care and such selflessness in moments where to care for me involved some very heavy lifting. And she's been an incredible support to me, but more than that, she's an extraordinary intellect. We have a little production company. She does all the heavy lifting there as well. She is an amazing human being, and her decency and the beauty of her spirit is something that I continually aspire to. And so, where are you? There you are. How are you, sister? You all right? Hey, Claw. So I'd just like to thank you for all your help through the years, love. And again, Santa Barbara, thanks a million for this. It's really very special. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. Have a wonderful night, and congratulations again to our special guests. Good night, everybody. See you next time.